G'day, Ed. Happy Monday. How are you, mate?
Hey, living the dream, Robbie. How you doing, buddy?
Living the dream. Let's turn this music down. I can't hear anything over that stupid music there, but I'm living the dream too. I had a really productive weekend. The weather has finally turned here in Australia, or in Sydney at least. It's freezing cold, man. It must be about 15 degrees Celsius, which is not very cold by Minnesota standards. And, that's still swimmable, but the surf is too big to go in the ocean, and it's pretty good. So I got some downtime over the weekend, caught up with some friends, recorded some videos. I got rid of Premiere Pro. If anyone out there listening or watching is using Premiere Pro, get off that garbage. Head on over to DaVinci Resolve. Much better over there. What about you, mate? What'd you get up to?
Well, taking a lot of homework, taking care of some errands. I just came from the bank. I got here just in time. I got some more. I got some more quarters and dimes and cash out of my bank. I don't know if do you guys have a coin shortage down under, or I mean, here it's become increasingly more difficult.
Not something that I don't have cash, man. I haven't had cash I don't even have a wallet anymore.
You just have gold doubloons. What are they?
No, I've got central bank digital credits, man, that are feeding that are on my phone from the Australian government.
Just another.
Do you have a coin shortage in America?
Huh?
Do you have a coin shortage in America?
Yeah, it is. It's difficult to get coins. So I've been, in addition to my regular gold and silver, I've been just stocking up with some just your usual, quarters and dimes, and I don't know. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? So but of course the cash, my ongoing project of pulling my cash out of the bank, it did that too, and so I picked up some more toilet paper from the bank today, and
wear my
tomorrow,
Republic style.
Yeah, that's tomorrow I'll pick up a couple more of these guys, a couple more of the gold coins.
You got some more gold?
Yeah,
awesome. That gold price is going off like a frog in a sock, mate, eh? What do you reckon?
I'm telling you, one of these days, people are going to start listening to me. No, look,
what?
I'll tell you. Well, actually, you know what? I'll pat myself on the back. The rare time, I actually do get a lot of emails from people who thanking me for the advice I've been giving them since the start of the channel, and it's always very humbling and flattering, and it's a very satisfying feeling when you get those kind of comments from people, and pretty much everything we've talked about have come true, and I hope that people listen, stick to the channel, people. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, because we're going to continue to give you a lot of really good information that you're not going to get anywhere else. We are going to give you the
unspoken truth, baby.
There you go.
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Let's get into today's show. Ed, we're doing it slightly differently, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to kind of ad lib as we go. We've got some pre-recorded segments ready, and we're going to be able to control our thoughts and contain our thoughts a little bit better and have a discussion on the other side of it as well. So today we're going to be talking about the woke leadership of the various Western countries out there, with the focus on the US. That's destroying the US military. If you don't know, there's a massive, massive recruiting crisis happening in the US. But it's not just in the United States. It's across the board, in actual fact. It's in all Western militaries. And I believe it's because of this woke green agenda that governments are imposing for some reason, and the idiots that are in charge, you're going to be taking orders from those people. So who wants to be part of that? Not me, that's for sure. Ed's going to be talking about some higher inflation and how that is completely unavoidable, and that continues to run away here in Australia as it does there in the United States, and that is being not curbed at all by higher interest rates. It seems to be getting worse and worse, and I'm not sure where this is going to end. I'm going to share with you some more about Australian politics that you may not know, Ed, and I think you'll find this pretty interesting as well. There's some green zealots that are ruining Australia here, turning off the baseload power. We're going to talk about energy. I'm going to share with you how they've blown up a project which is just unbelievable. Something that was supposed to be $1.5 billion is now $10 billion. Something that was supposed to launch in 2021 is now not going to launch until 2029. And I can tell you that the greenies that are behind this, and the green ideology and the zealots that are behind this, are responsible for that. and they'll do it at any cost. And I'll share some more information and insights on that. And we're going to close out the show by talking a little bit about AI and the wokeness of AI. You said that you wanted to call it, has AI gone woke? And I was going to say, well, no, AI was always woke. That's for some reason how it was programmed. I don't know why on earth it was programmed like that, but that's how it is. And Elon Musk has come out recently in an interview saying that he was talking about creating something that was along the lines of a truth GPT. So instead of giving you the woke green agenda, if you ever get into an argument with ChatGPT, you will figure out pretty quickly that a lot of what it's been programmed with is fake, and it's fake news, and it's just perpetuating the fake narrative that's out there as well. So you need to be careful if you're using ChatGPT for some type of research that you're cross-referencing the information with what it's actually telling you. Don't go to ChatGPT like you would Google and use that as gospel, because we all know that Google is not gospel. Google is a narrative as well, perpetuated by deep state. And likewise with any social media you see out there, really, aside from Twitter, is probably the only one out there these days that's free of any sort of wokeness or any sort of narrative that's out there. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here at The Unspoken Truth, welcome. It's great to have you here. Ed and I talk about the things that are not really being spoken about in mainstream media. We like to pull back the curtain and give you the real story behind the stories. You can find us over on Spotify, on Twitter, on Telegram, and also on Rumble. And we have those backups in case we get censored over here on YouTube. Sometimes when you get censored on YouTube, you end up with a strike on your channel and you can't do anything for 2 weeks. But that doesn't mean Ed and I won't be posting. We'll post over in Rumble, still recording, and we'll be posting in Telegram and also on Twitter. And you can catch us as a podcast on a daily basis over on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, figure out what works best for you, and plug in, because we'll give you the updates on a daily basis. Ed, have you got anything for us before we kick off the show today?
Just please smash that like button and let's get going.
Let's get into it, shall we? All right, I'm going to kick off by sharing some content about the US military. And I've got a quick pre-recorded presentation here, and we'll play that and we'll come on back once that's finished. All right, we'll go for a take 2 with that, shall we? Here we go. Hey team, Rob Bruss here with some unspoken truth. Now, you might have heard that the US Navy has been using a transgender non-binary person, whatever that is, to spark recruitment numbers. For some reason, the powers that be think that showing the Navy has a culture of inclusion will get more people interested in the jobs that the Navy has available. The thing that the zombies from the left don't understand is that no matter what job you have or what workforce you're part of, there are gay people and trans people everywhere. I was in the Army and the Navy, and there were plenty of gay people. Some were openly gay, and others, they kept it to themselves. The point is, it doesn't matter if you work in a restaurant, a supermarket, an office, or on a bloody warship, your ability to do a job is never governed by what you prefer behind closed doors. But for some reason, the left-leaning zombies of upper management of the US Navy think that your sexual fantasies will determine whether you want to join up or not. Here's the unspoken truth, and part of the reason why young people no longer want to serve in the military. And by the way, it's not just the US military that have a hard time with their recruiting numbers, it's across the board in all Western militaries. Now imagine if you're 17 or 18 and you're about to leave school, or you're thinking that a military job or service would be a good option. Reasonable pay, great training, lots of benefits, and it looks like a lot of fun. But then one day you switch on YouTube and you see that there's a withdrawal from Afghanistan underway. Being a younger person, you don't really understand the politics of it all. You just know that it might be cool to be one of those Marines or soldiers or airmen helping out those desperate people. Now fast forward a couple of days and you see babies being handed over barbed wire fences, people hanging on to cargo planes and falling off them, and suddenly a bomb goes off and kills a bunch of people desperate to get away from the Taliban. You'd be forgiven for thinking that it looks like hell on earth. Now fast forward a few more days and you realize that this is not a withdrawal, it's an evacuation of a defeated force that is not only leaving the people they came to help behind, but literally handing over billions of dollars worth of our equipment to the enemy. As you dig deeper, you discover that the rules of engagement allowed that suicide bomber to get through and to kill 13 servicemen and women, and you start to wonder, I thought those soldiers were there to kill the enemy. Aren't the Taliban the enemy? Why didn't we just kill them before they killed us?
Simple, right? And why have we left all of that equipment behind? What on earth is going on? It quickly becomes apparent to you as the young person that this is an absolute disaster and the whole world is watching. You ask yourself, what was this all for anyway? Why did all of those people and all of our soldiers have to die in that awful place in the last 20 years? You also know that the war in Iraq was based on a lie, and that was an absolute disaster, which gave us ISIS and more of our enemy, meaning Iran. Pretty quickly, you come to the conclusion that joining the military may not be such a good idea after all. Not because it's not a cool job, but because what you're going to be asked to do, or ordered to do, just doesn't align with your belief systems, and it's certainly not worth paying for any of that with your life. Here's some more unspoken truth for you, team. I lived in close quarters with my fellow sailors and on warships and in the bush with my fellow diggers for many years, and there's absolutely no problem with any part of military culture. In fact, military culture is amazing for a young person. It's one of the absolute best experiences you could ever hope to have. And it doesn't matter if you're straight or you're gay or you're something else. The job is accepting of all people from all walks of life. That's why we have the same haircuts and wear the same uniforms. It just doesn't matter where you're from. There's a reason for all of this, and it's simple. The mission is what comes first, and everything else takes a back seat. The massive failure of the zombified left is that they completely fail to recognize anything that I've just said, because the people from the left side of politics rarely serve. They're too scared to. They're afraid it won't align with their identities or their beliefs, but they're just wrong. They would be accepted and respected just like everybody else. That's the failure of the zombies on the left, and the thing that their undead brains cannot comprehend is that in the military, the people would actually love them for their differences. Another part of the unspoken truth of why the military recruiting numbers are so down across the world is because young people are much smarter than the zombies in charge would have you think. They look at the lies that the politicians tell, they look at the foolish leadership, the stupid decisions that are made day in and day out, and in less than 60 seconds, they could see that they'd be subjecting themselves to orders from these incompetent, stupid people that would potentially cost them their lives. The war in Iraq was based on a lie. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was the biggest embarrassment and disaster in US military history, and now we're in another war in Europe that's been cheered on by the warmongers in power that would never go near the front line. I bet you if you asked Joe Biden where the Donbass was, he couldn't point to it on a map. So what makes you think that a young person would ever join the military? It's easy for anyone with 2 eyes and 2 ears and a reasonably functioning brain to see that the people in charge are completely corrupt. Nancy Pelosi, who was the third in charge, made millions and millions of dollars on insider trading. Kamala Harris doesn't know her ass from her elbow, and when she's not creating new word salads for all of us to enjoy, she's being laughed at by literally everyone else on planet Earth. As we inch closer to the center of gravity, we could replace Mark Milley and Lloyd Austin with B1 and B2 and probably get a better result. We now know that Anthony Blinken was responsible for the 50 signatures from the intelligence chiefs that said the Hunter Biden laptop was fake, even though Hunter Biden himself came out and said the laptop might be his. Then we have the leader of the free world who's responsible for giving the orders to the military. Now imagine being a young private on the front line, knowing that the orders to close with and destroy the Chinese military came from a group of corrupt liars led by a senile man in mental decline. Any person, young or old, can see all of this in plain sight. No person who spent just 10 minutes thinking about their future in the military would ever consider this to be a worthwhile job. So I ask you zombies on the left that want to be protected from the vicious enemies at your gate, which self-respecting adult considering a job in the military would ever think about putting themselves in harm's way for any prime minister or president in the name of freedom? You must be kidding me. The reason that the US military has a massive shortfall in their recruitment numbers is not because of a failure to accept different people into their ranks. They've always done that. Every military in history that has ever existed has done that. The benchwarmer zombies on the left don't know that because they've never played for their country. They expect the best and brightest of us who are not as educated as them to do it on their behalf, so they can sip on their oat lattes and watch Netflix for 18 hours a week, all while tucking their dick between their legs, pretending to be something they're not. The unspoken truth and the real reason why the US militaries and militaries all around the world have a recruiting problem is because the left have set the conditions for World War III. A nuclear apocalypse, a war with China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia, and no person with a brain in their head would ever put their life on the line for a zombie that thinks that he is a she or a she is a he, and then go forth to die in the name of freedom. You idiots on the left are going to get us all killed.
You there?
Yeah, there I am. Sorry.
There he is.
Mute button. I was just taking a second to get off my high horse. Yeah, I had to climb down from the. It's quite tall, that high horse. It's about 10 feet tall. Yeah, look, you know, I've been watching a bunch of Senate and committee hearings where all these military leaders are coming together and they're being questioned by politicians, and the politicians are continuously asking them what's going on with the recruitment. You know, these politicians are the ones that are signing off on, you know, the military folks are coming along saying, we need this much money. All right, sure, no worries. You need money for readiness. You need money for equipment, lethality, all the things that you need. But the most important thing that you've got is your people that underpins everything that you're doing. Why are you missing your recruitment targets? Why do you continuously miss those? What's going wrong? And they continuously say the same things. We don't know. And I saw an alarming statistic yesterday. Tell me what you think about this one, Ed. Is something like 80% of people that are right in the sweet spot for military service, meaning they're between the ages of 18 and 24, something like that, like maybe a bit younger, maybe 22. But 80% of those people are not eligible to serve because they wouldn't meet the fitness sedan. So that's a pretty alarming problem. For heaven's sake, there's conscription going on all day long in Ukraine, conscription going on all day long in Russia. What happens if that happens in America, man? You're not going to have enough people.
Boy, I wish I could argue with you. I wish I could say, you're preaching to the choir, man. Listen, I never served in the military, but I've always been a big proponent and a big fan of the military. That's one of the reasons why the movie channel that I have, I post so many, military type movies. I love that stuff. There's a reason why. No, I haven't been in the military, but I know enough to make this comment. That on your first day of arrival in boot camp, the first thing you do is you head over to the barber and get a haircut. You know, they shave you down, right? And then they spend the next several weeks insulting you, brutalizing you, and putting your face in the mud. The idea being that they want to tear you down because they're going to build you back up as a team, right? It's about learning how to be part of a team. And you're supposed to a great degree, leave your individualism behind in that respect. Respect that when you join the military, it's not about you anymore. When you join the military, you know that you are giving yourself over to a larger entity, to a larger cause, and you want to. You consider that a noble effort. Now, in the old days, people view that as a noble thing to do. They joined because they wanted to serve. That's the whole idea when you join the military, because you have a sense of service. You want to give back somehow. You want to protect. You want to provide. Even if you're not going to be on the tip of the spear, even if you're not going to be in the front line, for every person in combat, there's 10, 20 people behind you supporting you, right? So but it's all part of being part of a cause that's bigger than yourself. And wokeness doesn't fit that model. The woke crowd, it's all about them. It's all what's good for them, and they're militant about it. If you not only do you have to accept that they are what they are, but you have to cheer them on. And if you don't, they're gonna diminish you and they're gonna insult you. Now,
I'm going to push back a bit on that, Ed, because there is huge diversity in the military. The way I describe it is it's a if you go, I remember cross-decking onto a couple of different ships. I cross-decked onto a British warship, an American one, Singaporean one, some Indos. And I remember thinking that when you go on these ships, they're a microcosm of those societies. I remember going on these British warships and they all seem just like Aussies, right? But everyone on those ships are from different demographics, right? They're from different parts of the country. They're from, from rich, from poor families, from all those things. And that's kind of amplified even more when you go on an American warship. And that's because you have such a diverse culture in the United States. Diversity and inclusion is par for the course in the military. And the thing that I'm pushing back on about the wokeness and the inclusion side of thing, they're trying to use this transgender, non-binary person, whatever that means, to help people to understand that inclusion is the name of the game in the military. But that's something that has gone without saying forever, since
Yeah.
Roman times. If you wanted to go and hold a spear and a javelin and a shield, then there you go to the training and sign up like everybody else. Like, it's really no different in Roman
No,
times
look,
than it is today.
I agree. Maybe I misspoke, but the military, I think, is the ultimate merit-based job.
Isn't it?
Yeah. If you're good at what you're doing, you're going to be rewarded. Competence is everything, and everything else. And yeah, whether you're Jewish, Catholic, black, white, it doesn't matter as long as you can do the job.
And that right there is the mistake of the people in charge coming up with this transgender idea, is that they don't realize that the military is a merit-based job. And it's not about you being there the longest. There's plenty of, I was in the army with people that were diggers for like 20 years. They never passed the rank of private because they either never wanted to, or probably more likely they were just not competent. So they were never pushed on to the next rank and to move forward, and whenever they were offered a course, they were like, "No, I'm good. I don't want to do that. I'm just happy to stay where I am," sort of thing. And that's the mistake of people that are thinking they can use a transgender person to show inclusion. Everything is already included, but what they don't understand is you're trying to show a job based around equity and inclusion. And to your point, Ed, absolutely no other job in the world is more governed by your merit, and it has nothing to do with equity or inclusion. For heaven's sake, women are fighter pilots dropping bombs. Women are special forces soldiers shooting enemy troops in the face, for heaven's sake. If you're good enough to be there, you'll be included. But if you're
There
not
you
good
go.
enough,
You
you
know
don't
what?
meet the standard,
And
you won't.
as far as I'm concerned, enough said. That's all that should have to be said about the topic. We don't care about your sexual fantasies behind closed doors. We don't care. Can you do the job? If you can do the job, you're in. That should be the end of the discussion.
Why isn't our society based? Our society used to be a meritocracy. That's what meritocracy means, right? Is it's a rewards based system. It's based on merit, but for some reason, it's gone from a rewards and a merit based system to an inclusion based system. I was watching a show yesterday on Netflix called Somebody Feed Phil, and he's like a foodie. He's a really funny dude. He goes around to all these different places and kind of it's a good laugh. It's fun, and he was in Chile. And he goes to Chile, and the first person that he meets with is, so she's a nice lady, a food writer, and he says, "Oh, there's some big changes going on here in your country." And she was saying, "Yeah, we're rewriting the constitution here in Chile, and it's going to be more inclusive." And I'm like, "Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that there's going to be gender-based targets? Because that's got nothing to do with inclusivity. That's all got to do with some strange ideology that thinks that women want to do men's jobs and men want to do women's jobs, but that's just not true." And all of this transgender garbage that the military keep putting out and they keep perpetuating doesn't make any sense because it doesn't solve their recruitment problem. What I believe that the thing that is their recruitment problem is the leadership of the country. Like, why would any young person who saw what happened in Afghanistan, who has understood what's gone on for the last 20 years? Because if I put my hand up and said to my mum and dad, "Hey, I'm thinking about joining the army or the Marines or the Air Force or something like that," they'd go, "Really? Did you know what happened in the last couple of years? Have you seen what's happened?" Because as a parent caring about a kid, I would make sure that my kid was educated to make the decision. And it's got nothing to do with inclusion or transgender or being gay or being straight or anything like that. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with the leadership. And the leadership of the country are so incompetent and woke and stupid that why would you ever subject yourself to the people at the top? They're the ones giving the orders. But everything that they've done in the last 20 years has been based on a lie. All of it. The war in Iraq has been based on a lie. The extended corruption in Afghanistan has all been based on lies. The mindless killing and drone strikes killing civilians, all of that is covered up and all of it's a lie. And why would you ever want to be part of an organization where the people in charge are consistently and continuously lying, not only to the public, but to the people that are at the sharp end of the spear pulling the trigger? Like, why would you ever want to be part of that? And the woke don't understand. It's got nothing to do with inclusion. It's got everything to do with leadership. And the leadership have completely failed. They've completely and totally failed.
Well, I think it happens before that, before they're even exposed to the leadership personally. I mean, listen, the military draws upon its populace, right? And so it has a certain pool of people that it, to draw upon. And as you alluded to earlier, most of the kids these days, or a large percentage of the kids, cannot even pass the physical fitness requirements to be admitted in the military. We have a culture of gamers whose idea of a Friday night is not to go out to the local bar to see if they can impress the prettiest girl in the room. Their idea is to stay home and get online with some guy halfway across the world to see who can kill the most whatever online. And so we have a culture. Look, there's a saying. I'm probably going to get this wrong. There's kind of a string to it, right? Hard men create good times. Good times create soft men. Soft men create hard times, right?
Yeah, you bang on, mate. You didn't butcher that at all.
Okay, great. Cool. So there's kind of a natural cycle in every civilization, right? So in a weird sort of way, the fact that that a large part of that our population is soft, not just physically, but I think also morally, is kind of a result of our great success.
Yep.
I mean, if now not me so much, but other people, if their cell phone battery dies or they're out of the house and they don't have a charger, their day is messed up. They get discombobulated. But you think some person in the Netherlands of Nigeria is tied to his cell phone? He's got bigger things to worry about. The transgenderism is not a really big topic on hand in most third world countries. Like, they got bigger fish to fry. They have bigger things to worry about, like how are they going to eat that day? Right?
Yeah, literally.
So in a way, we have the luxury of worrying about the silliest things. And that's just a theory of mine that, since our military draws upon its populace, I don't know, when you have, I don't know, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think you're bang on as well, right? And when societies reach a point where food is abundant, security is abundant, and all of those things, now you've got time to think about the existential things. You hear Jordan Peterson talk about climate change, and one of the things that he says is you need to have a wealthy population to then be able to worry about the environment. Because if you've ever been to a third world country where they're not wealthy, the place is a mess. There's rubbish everywhere. There's no infrastructure. There's no people to do what you would expect in a normal functioning society. And that's because they simply don't have enough money. And those people in society, to your point, are not thinking about their mobile phone. They're thinking about their stomach. And if they don't know how to get fed, the last thing on their mind is, how can we fix climate change, or how can we fix these problems? And we've reached a point in our societies here in the West where we're able to think about those things and consider the future, and to do that from a good perspective as well. They're all of the greenies out there, as much as I think they're crazy, they're well-meaning. They want the world to be a better place. They want the environment to be better. They want less pollution. They want less, impact and less footprint on the environment. And all of that is a good thing. They're meaning well. Just the way that they go about it is fundamentally wrong and flawed. And I don't like telling people that they're wrong, but they are wrong.
It's kind of funny when you think about all these liberals and leftists who claim that they hold the mantle of tolerance, right? But in my experience, they are the least tolerant people in the world. Heaven forbid, you should disagree with them on anything. They will come down hard, on you. I don't know what made me think of that. I was at a party once, when I was when I was in New York, and it just happened to be a room full of Filipinos, and most of them were immigrants. A lot of those were nurses. Filipinos are famous for their nurses. And somehow the topic came up about somebody going to a therapist about depression, and And one of the nurses said something that kind of stuck in my mind ever since. She said, "Well, depression is a rich man disease." I mean, basically, she grew up where they didn't have time to be depressed. They had to worry about getting food on the table that day.
How are you going to eat? Yeah. Andrew Tate says the same thing as well. Andrew Tate he came out and said, "I don't think depression is real. If you're feeling depressed and you're feeling a bit down, I understand that. Everybody feels that. But if you're feeling depressed, go to the gym and get yourself a six-pack and come back to me and tell me if you're depressed. Because I promise you, as soon as you start exercising, all of those feelings will go away and all of that stuff will happen." Look, one of the reasons that I wanted to do that story, and that was something that I wanted to get off my chest. I love having a microphone and a camera and the skills and the abilities to do all of these things, because I feel like once it's out, and it's no longer in my head and it's no longer bothering me. I know there's a lot of stories and things that happen in society that really annoy people, and they can't do anything about it. So they feel this huge amount of frustration. And I would encourage people to find a creative outlet, to find a podcast, to find a video, to find something that helps them to get that off their chest. And I want to close out this little segment by saying, Ed, that the narrative that is being perpetuated in and around transgenderism and all this garbage that's out there in our societies is exactly that. It's a narrative. That is like 0.01% of our society. There's such a small amount of people that actually affects. But this, for some reason, is being perpetuated as a narrative. And I wanted to highlight that US Navy story because the narrative is being perpetuated. And if you didn't really think about why the military had a recruiting problem, you just think, oh, they're just trying to recruit more people. But the reality is what they're doing in the process of that is perpetuating the narrative of transgenderism that only affects 0.01% of the world's population. It's such a small number of people that it's just irrelevant. The chances of that guy in that video that was dancing around dressed up as a woman, he's probably on an aircraft carrier and there's 5,000 other people there and he's the only one, and he's he's the exception to the rule. It's not like that's not the rule. That's the exception to the rule. And what they're doing, what mainstream media are doing by amplifying the Navy's message there is perpetuating the narrative. And what they're doing is they're getting you to look over here at this distraction, while over here, the incompetency in leadership is the real reason why no one is joining the military. But they don't want you to know that, because they know that if you think about it for about 30 seconds, you'll go, there's no reason for me to join the military, especially if Joe Biden was giving the orders or that Mark Milley moron was in charge. Are you kidding me? If those people are the ones giving me the orders after what happened in Afghanistan, and they're still there, and they didn't even apologize, and they weren't ever held accountable, no one will be held accountable to it. They just shrug their shoulders and go, bad luck. Remember, shortly after Afghanistan, the withdrawal, they went after some guy with a drone, and they thought he was an enemy terrorist, and they killed him as he was leaving his house. And as he was leaving his house, he was putting his 4 kids into a 4-wheel drive, and it wasn't a terrorist at all. It was a civilian. But, sorry about killing all those innocent people for no reason. Oh, we just made a mistake again, right? Nobody is ever held accountable. The real reason that nobody's joining the military is because the leadership are idiots and they're incompetent, not because of transgenderism not being accepted in the military, but that's what they'd have you believe. And that's a narrative, and let's close the book on that one, and we'll move to the next part of the show. Have you got any closing thoughts on that, or do you want to kick off to the inflation bit?
I did, but no, enough said, I think.
All right, beautiful. All right, you're going to talk to us about higher inflation and why that is unavoidable. Let me pull myself out of the...
Okay, so I know this topic might feel like I'm a dog with a bone talking about this topic, and pretty much every I have other topics I do want to get to, but this is such important stuff, and every day there's a new development. So I wanted to kind of scratch this itch a little bit more. So let's get to it. I hate to say it, but higher inflation is unavoidable. All right, let's talk about it.
Romance for lovers only.
Okay, so is higher inflation in the cards? Does it have to happen? Well, in my opinion, yes, it does. So let's get into that and talk about what you should be doing right now. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at an article out of CNBC, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, after First Republic's rescue, economists predict further pain with a new era of higher inflation. Central banks around the world have been aggressively raising interest rates for over a year in a bid to curb sky-high inflation. But economists warned in recent days that price pressures looked likely to remain higher for longer. Almost 80% of chief economists surveyed by the WEF, but there it is, said central banks face a trade-off between managing inflation and maintaining financial sector stability. Now let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so the cause of the recent spate of bank failures is largely due to the historical rise of interest rates. Interest rates have gone up at the fastest pace since 1980. And all these banks, they have the same stuff on their books. All of their debt-related securities have gone down in value as interest rates have gone up, because that is the way bonds work, right? Bonds have an inverse relationship with interest rates. As interest rates go up, the value of bonds go down. So the balance sheet of these banks have been just decimated. And the more interest rates go up, the worse it's going to get. Now, raising rates is the Federal Reserve's, all central banks, it is their chief tool in fighting inflation. And so as inflation goes up, they've been raising rates. And they've had to raise rates so dramatically because they kept interest rates low for so long. So these central banks have a choice. Do they keep raising rates in an attempt to fight inflation and at the same time hurt the economy, make your lives miserable? Or do they chicken out? Do they succumb to the pressure by Wall Street and pivot and start sending interest rates down again? Well, if that happens, then we're going to see hyperinflation. On the one hand, they have to make your life so miserable that you stop spending money, or they pivot, send interest rates lower, and then you see hyperinflation, which is also going to make your life miserable. Either way, every aspect of our lives are going to become more expensive. In the West, we are debt-based societies, and this is the monster that we have created. Central banks around the world have been aggressively raising interest rates for over a year in a bid to curb sky-high inflation. But economists warned in recent days that price pressures look likely to remain higher for longer. The WEF Chief Economist Outlook report published Monday highlighted that inflation remains a primary concern. Almost 80% of chief economists surveyed said central banks face a trade-off between managing inflation and maintaining financial sector stability. Now, I'm not going to play this video here. Let's just read this one line here. We're entering a structurally more inflationary world, and that will mean more failures. Okay, so remember, interest rates have been the boogeyman in the financial industry lately, and that's why banks have been failing. Okay, well, if the central banks sincerely want to fight inflation, they have to keep raising rates, quite a bit more, actually. And by doing that, they're going to make every aspect of all of our lives more expensive. Inflation will be coming. Okay? With the rise of rates, everything is going to become more expensive. Now, the alternative of that is to pivot and start lowering rates. But by doing that, they're not fighting inflation anymore. So that would have the probability of sending us to hyperinflation, which would also make our lives more expensive. So these central banks are in a bind. Either way, our lives are going to be made more miserable. So I don't see how you can avoid it. Now, listen, back in 2008, the big culprit for that financial disaster were mortgage-backed securities. And everyone got a very quick lesson in mortgage-backed securities. Now let me tell you about the bogeyman in this next financial crisis. Instead of mortgage-backed securities, it's going to be commercial mortgage-backed securities. A lot of buildings are lying empty. Now, you probably have not heard of commercial mortgage-backed securities, CMBSs, before. But my guess is before too long, you're going to see report after report about CMBSs, and you heard it here first. So listen, if the central banks continue to raise rates to fight inflation, our lives are going to become more expensive. If they lower rates and create hyperinflation, then everything's going to become more expensive. Either way, brace yourselves. Start taking steps. Reduce your exposure to your bank, put some of that money into gold and silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income. So in the comment section below, please let me know what you've been doing lately. Have you been reducing your debt? Have you been getting your money out of the bank? Have you been buying gold and silver? And I would love to see your comments. But in the spirit of respecting your time, we'll leave it there. All right. How'd you like the opening there, Rob?
Yeah. Ed, you're the Jedi Grand Master at explaining those really complicated subjects. and you do it in a way that's just cuts through all of the spin. So I want to say thank you for doing that and putting that together. It's really when you explain it like that in really simple terms, it kind of makes me even more worried for the economy as it is. What are we at now? 5.25%.
The federal funds rate, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell people, when you were a lot younger, back in the 1980s, when you arrived on Wall Street in 1987 before it tanked, what were the interest rates then?
And I know and I know you know the answer to this. That's why you're bringing it up. You wanted me to admit my first mortgage on my first house, which I bought in 1987, 2 weeks
Same
after
year the stock market crashed.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Yeah, and I bought that house like 2 weeks after I became a stockbroker. Talking about getting ahead of the curtain, I was really stretching myself. But I was married to a girl who had to buy the house. She was in a hurry to buy a house. The mortgage on our first house was 19.5%.
Holy cow, man! It's like buying a house with a credit card.
yeah. People look prior to this this last decade, mortgage rates had not been below 5% since World War II. Right? So people now are spoiled. We do have a generation of people now who don't know what high interest rates are. Right? They've been spoiled. We had 7 years there at 0% interest rate. They think that's normal. That is not normal. Now, the Federal Reserve, all the central banks, they're in a tight spot right now. Now, in the West, we kind of painted ourselves. We created this monster. It was eminently unavoidable. The issues they're having right now were predictable. You know, I mean, I saw it coming. I've been talking about it for 2 years. You've seen it coming. If Ed Anderson in Wayzata, Minnesota can see it coming, some guy in a $5,000 suit in Wall Street should have been able to see it coming. You know, so this is very predictable and it was unavoidable. Now, we're assuming that the Federal Reserve wants to do the right thing. Now, the Federal Reserve's mandate is supposed to be to control inflation. That's their primary job, is to control inflation. And the target is supposed to be around 2%. They claim it's 2%. That's pretty much their job. They have money supply stuff and all the rest of it. But the primary job is to control inflation. Well, if they are legitimately going to try to fight inflation, you have to raise the federal funds rate above the rate of inflation. Right? Which means we have about another doubling of interest rates to go, assuming inflation doesn't accelerate more.
Well, it's almost, when you think about it, it's almost a tripling, right? Because if you Google it right now, you'll see inflation is around 8%. And so if we're at 5.25 or 5.5%, say, you literally have to double. But in real life, let's be real for a second, inflation is not 8%. Inflation is more like 15 to 20%.
Correct.
So in order for it to actually get under control, it doesn't matter. That's what you keep saying. And I don't think people really understand that. And in order for this to actually get under control, interest rates need to be near 20%, where it was in 1987 when you bought your first house. But that's never, ever going to go there, because to your point in the video there, as soon as interest rates go up, that inverse relationship with the bond market, and the bond market's the biggest market in the world, if interest rates go up much more than it is, it's going to collapse all of the banks, even the big ones, all of them.
Bingo. You nailed it. And that is the issue, right? If we've seen some major banks go under already with the rate increases we have, what would happen if they raise rates more? We're going to see more massive bank failures.
It's going to happen. Exposure to the bond market. That's the reason why.
Exactly right. So, so that brings up the question whether they're sincerely interested in fighting inflation or whether they're perfectly happy to raise those rates because it is going to put those banks out of business. And in my opinion, I think that is part of their agenda. They do want to whittle down the number of banks. And I think they do want to get it down to those top 3 or 4 banks. So this idea of banks failing behind closed doors, when everyone's got their cell phones turned off, I'm sure they're cheering that these banks are failing because it's moving them toward. They'll never say that in public, Okay, so but just for just so people understand, look, whether this is by design or by incompetence, what does it mean to us? What does it mean to you? And the net result is, well, if they raise interest rates in their effort to fight inflation, everything becomes more expensive. Loans are become more expensive. The house you're in, if you're in an adjustable rate mortgage, you're going to be people are going to be losing their houses in droves. Everything's going to be becoming more expensive. Now, if they stop raising rates or even pivot and lower rates, because Wall Street would like that, right? They would like to have lower rates. If they did that to cater to Wall Street, that's going to lead to hyperinflation. Because remember, the whole idea behind raising rates is to deliberately make our lives miserable. It's to make us poorer. That is the idea of raising rates. Because inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. If you're making a lot of money, they don't like that. They want to impoverish you. That's literally what raising rates is for. It's to impoverish you, to make your lives more difficult. That's the whole idea. So you're spending too much money, people. So we got to stop it. So we're going to make your lives miserable until you stop buying stuff. That's what the net effect is of raising interest rates. So that's not good. People don't like to be impoverished, but if they lower rates, then it's going to, people are going to spend even more money, and that leads to hyperinflation. So it's a catch-22, right? We're in a position right now where we are damned if we do, damned if we don't. I cannot see a path in which our lives are not going to become more expensive. I think it's unavoidable. I think either scenario is just the way we are at this point in history. So you got to be proactive. Don't ignore this stuff. Because look, on the other side, being with my background on Wall Street, I like chaos because I know how to take advantage of it. You know, it's kind of the American way to make money off of other people's misery. So
well, let's not make money off other people's misery. Let's together collectively let's hold hands and kumbaya and recite the mantra of the unspoken truth. Reduce your exposure to the bank, get your money into some gold and silver, and create some passive streams of recurring income. So that's the way to protect yourself from these things. Because if you've got some passive income from multiple different sources, if things start to cost a little bit more money, you're not just relying on the one source of income that's not going to go as far as it was. And that's some real practical things that you can do by reducing your exposure to the bank and getting your cash out of the bank and putting it into some gold and silver. You're locking in the value of that cash today. Whatever the gold price is today, you've locked in that value into that piece of precious metal right now today. And there's so many ways that you can do that. If you're interested in finding out some more about how to reduce your exposure and get some gold and silver, I encourage you to head on over to Ed's YouTube channel. The link is right there just below, and it's down below in the description as well. And he's got some great programs that will show you how to do that. None of these scammy crypto projects or anything like that. This is physical gold and silver, and Ed will help you out with that as well. And every person should be getting involved in that. That's not financial advice. That's just fact. That's the reality. If you want to survive in the chaos that's coming and you're not planning on being short or taking option positions and doing all sorts of crazy financial things, then the simplest thing you can do is reduce your exposure, get some gold and silver, and get some passive recurring income going. And do it while you can now. Get it while the getting is good, folks, because sooner or later that getting won't be so good at all. Have you got any closing thoughts there, Ed?
Yeah, well, on the topic, gold is starting to make a fresh new high, guys. And silver too. It's popping. There's a reason. Look, there's a reason why central banks around the world have been hoarding gold in record numbers. Now, to paint a picture for you on that, just real quick, it is a good point. Is central banks, their job is to protect their fiat currencies, right? In our case, it's the U.S. dollar. Their job is to protect our currency. That's their job. Well, when the central banks are buying gold, what does that tell you about their confidence in their currencies?
Well, they're locking away the value of the currency into gold. They're swapping one thing for the other because they understand that today it's worth $2,000 an ounce and I lock away X amount of dollars into that, then I've locked in the value. If suddenly the value of the dollar goes away and the price of gold runs away as well, you're getting a double whammy there.
Yeah. I mean, they don't want you to buy gold.
No, absolutely not.
But they are. No.
Follow their lead. All right, folks, let's shift gears, and I'm going to share some more woke stuff going on here in Australia. Can you believe it? It's hard for me to believe that this stuff is actually going on. It's really quite alarming for me. I grew up as a proud Aussie. I grew up as somebody who was deeply patriotic about this country. I served my country. I was proud of that. I used to have flags hanging up here in my apartment and stuff. And now where I see this going with mostly because of these green zealots, these people who think they can control the weather. That's how arrogant these people are. They think they can control the weather. And at every opportunity, they'll come out and tell you that the climate and the weather is worse than it was before, where there's no evidence to prove that. In fact, the Prime Minister of Australia continues to perpetuate the lie that cyclones are getting worse and bushfires are getting worse and all of the environmental things that are there, but there's no evidence to prove that. In fact, the evidence is the opposite. It's actually less than what it once was, but they'll never tell you that because they won't let facts get in the way of their crazy stories. All right, I got a little thing here, goes for about 6 minutes, so check it out and we'll come back once it's done and have a little discussion. 10 minutes. Well, let me just add this to the stream. StreamYard's not playing ball with me. Here we go. In less than 10 minutes, I'm going to expose the staggering incompetence of the Australian government, who are driven by climate-obsessed zealots who are spearheading the systematic destruction of our society, all while forcing you to worship at their feet as the gods who can control the weather. The Snowy 2.0 project, designed as a pumped hydro energy storage system to balance Australia's electricity grid, has turned into a disastrous, costly fiasco. Functioning as a giant battery, it was meant to store energy by pumping water between two dams at different elevations and releasing it through turbines to generate electricity during high demand periods. However, the project has been plagued with catastrophic setbacks. Staggering delays, cost overruns, and the government incompetence, they've completely ruined what was envisaged as an amazing project. The tunnel boring machines that have been working there have been crawling at a snail's pace. One of the machines only covered 200 meters in the past year. At that rate, it would take an astonishing 70 years to complete the task. Luckily, for now, they've resolved that issue, but that's an example of how incompetent these people are. The project was commissioned by Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull in 2017, and it was expected to cost between $1.5 to $2 billion, and was meant to be completed within 4 years. However, the costs have now ballooned to more than $5.9 billion, with predictions that it may reach as high as $10 billion. None of this accounts for the additional $10 billion needed for transmission lines, and those transmission lines haven't even been sited or built yet. Instead of launching in 2021 as the project was initially scheduled for, it now faces a completion date of 2029. The government's negligence and refusal to heed warnings from experts has jeopardized energy security and the economy. For some strange green reason, they can't help themselves, and they're now systematically shutting down baseload power, threatening us all with brownouts and blackouts, not to mention the massive increases in your power bills. So much for the election promise of lower energy prices and lower power bills. I guess that was all just Labor spin. Desperate for a solution, experts from the energy industry are now urging honest conversations and practical solutions to save billions of dollars and address Australia's energy crisis now. And it makes more sense to do that. They're trying to get ahead of the problems before they arise, not react to them after they're here. Sadly, politicians from both sides of politics are hamstrung by the foolish green ideology that's now threatening our way of life here in Australia. They continue to refuse to listen to the industry experts that are actually part of the solution. It seems to me that the government is deliberately undermining the energy sector, which is the foundation of our society, in pursuit of a stupid fake green agenda. Who is it that is so arrogant that they think they can control the weather anyway?
The Liberal Party were and are just as dumb as the Labor Party are. They have both consistently disregarded expert opinions and warnings, stubbornly pushing forward with unrealistic energy targets, pretending that wind and solar will save us all from ourselves and save us from a 1 degree rise in temperature. None of this, folks, none of it is driven by the truth. The unspoken truth is that the green ideology is a way of controlling you. The socialist fools that govern this country would have you believe that they can control the weather and that everything is worse than it ever was, despite no such evidence existing. We can all see that there's a complete lack of contingency planning to try and maintain the existing energy production while we're transitioning to these new projects like Snowy 2.0 and wind and solar. Experts have been calling on governments for a long time now to use gas as the transition fuel. However, neither side seems to be interested in listening to the experts. Now, you don't have to be a government consultant to know that these so-called green projects don't make for sound investments. It's a well-known fact that by the time any of these so-called renewable projects reach a point where they've gained a return on the investment, they're near obsolete. Then disposing of them and replacing them is an absolute environmental catastrophe all on its own. But no green zealot ever wants to talk to you about any of that. Why would they? They only care about worshipping the green gods and enforcing their strange ideology. They don't care about facts or truth. As the current economy continues to suffer because of record high energy prices and companies face bankruptcy, like the main contractor for Snowy 2.0, massive cost overruns will continue to cause delays spanning years. Snowy 2.0 has now cost almost 3 times what it was originally budgeted for and is now 8 years beyond the initial go-live date. The stupid green policies of both sides of government are now responsible for blindly shutting down the current energy infrastructure of Australia. They're naively hoping that untested green projects will fill the void. The current Labor government is driven by green zealots that are hell-bent on dismantling our reliable baseload power infrastructure in favour of unproven and incomplete technologies. This reckless pursuit of a radical green agenda, coupled with a complete disregard for expert opinions and warnings, is putting our society's energy security and stability at risk. The left side of politics have a very strange and blind faith in these untested green projects. They seem to be praying to the imaginary gods of climate change, hoping that they're right, while systematically shutting down our current energy sources for no reason at all. What if the gods that they're praying to turn out to be false prophets? And they are. Then we're all stuffed. The Labor Party continues to worship at the altar of some imaginary green pope, thinking that they're going to be kissed on the dick with sustainable solutions while knowing full well there's actually no such thing as sustainable, green or free energy. No such definition exists. Nothing is free, sustainable or truly green. Nothing. All these stupid politicians and bureaucrats in power are doing is overseeing the controlled demolition of our society that will force you and I as their constituents to supplicate to their stupid, evil, socialist, green ideology. If you voted for Labor or the Greens, then you voted for blackouts, for higher bills, more taxes, and a complete and absolute incompetence to be on display every day of their term in government. There is to be no complaining about any of this, especially when there's a blackout. When the lights do go out, your job will be to hold hands with your fellow green zealot, reach for your Ouija board, summon the Pope of climate change, and pray for forgiveness for your stupidity.
Alrighty. I had to get off that high horse. It's about 15 feet in the air, that one. Those politicians think they're kissed on the dick, mate. They think that everything's going to be okay for them. I saw you laughing there, Ed. I thought you'd like that Australianism right there.
Sometimes I think that you're on a mission to see how quickly you can get us censored.
How quickly I can get us cancelled completely, right? I can't believe what a disaster it's turned into, like that Snowy 2.0. In theory, it's a great idea. In theory, that if it could be done for $1.5 billion, it's what an amazing project, what a great idea, what incredible technology. But the reality is always very different. And for some reason, I don't know why, they just underestimate the scale of these projects. They just underestimate how complicated and difficult these things are, and
Well,
they don't react to it.
Well, you're assuming that they're sincere about it.
It goes to the
That's
heart of the previous segment that you were talking about, right? It's either deliberate or it's incompetent. So
Yeah, listen,
in financial terms, I think it's completely deliberate, right? And I think you're 100% right when you say behind closed doors, they're cheering on the collapse, they're cheering on the lifting of interest rates, because when there's less banks, it'll be easier to control. In this case here, with the Australian government and the people that are in charge, I don't think it's deliberate. And I
I
go
do.
back
I
to what I
do.
said. I don't think so. I don't think with this project. I think the idea of the project is sound. And I don't think any person, any normal, reasonable person would not think that, hey, if we could do that with technology and we could
Sure. Well, makes
we
perfect
could do that,
sense. How can
yeah.
you argue?
And that's what I mean. I don't think their
Yeah.
intention is bad. So now we only have one thing left remaining:
Okay.
incompetence.
Well, okay. Well,
It's
let me
not
give you.
deliberate. They're not deliberately incompetent.
Well, give you a controversial counterpoint, just for food for thought. Let me play devil's advocate here. First of all, let's all agree that there's no accountability in government and
None.
with any kind of government project. So
Malcolm Turnbull's long gone. He was long gone for
see, I mean,
2018, whatever it is.
it's very easy to be generous with other people's money. When it doesn't affect you. And I would like to have a little. I'd like to have some investigative journalists looking to see how many of these politicians are living a pretty high life now, and trace it back. Yeah, I wonder if there's a little bit of Bidenism going on, in all of that. That'd be an interesting little segment for someone to do. Someone who's looking to make to earn the Pulitzer Prize. Let's get some investigative journalists on that.
You're in New South
okay.
Wales. You don't have to go very far, man. All New South Wales premiers, except the last one who lost the election, have been ousted by the ICAC, the Independent Commission Against Corruption. They've been ousted. The last, I think, 4 of them gone because they were corrupt. And all 4 of them, guess where they're working? Senior positions at major Australian corporations.
Really,
right now.
Shocked. I'm shocked.
Stop it! Don't be shocked.
Yeah, come on, that never happened. Okay. Well, okay. So let me give you my counter opinion here about maybe how this could have been. How they might not have given a flying squirrel about the energy problem that it's going to solve. And let me point to our good old friends at the WEF. Okay, now everybody probably. Maybe not everyone, but Rob and I are familiar with the story behind Sri Lanka last year. Now, Sri Lanka, they made a bold push to become ESG compliant. Now, a lot of people know about ESG scores and how they want to push ESG scores on us. But what people might not know is corporations have their own ESG score categories, and countries have their own ESG scores for getting the loans. And Sri Lanka, they bowed to the whims of the green agenda in order to get that high ESG score, that coveted high ESG score. Because then when they get also the benefits from the IMF, and they get invited to the red cocktail parties in Davos. So they adopted these draconian environmental policies, like getting rid of natural gas, all the stupid ideas. But the policies that they had to adopt in order to get a high ESG score decimated the country's environment. There is a satellite image of Sri Lanka the year before they fell, and then the year that they fell. In one picture, it's green. The entire country was green. In the next picture, it's all gray, because people had to cut down trees in order to make fires to cook their meals, to heat. Right. So that was a predictable result of adopting these ESG score policies. And so these governments are bending over their backwards. They're turning themselves into pretzels in order to look good to the right powers to be. And the powers to be are unelected officials, unelected elites in a country far, far away. but they wield an enormous amount of power. And these politicians, they want to be part of that club. Look at Jolene Arden, or Juliet Arden, whatever her first name is.
Jacinta
the
Arden.
Yeah, she's on the board of the WEF, and she was one of those young leaders. Justin Trudeau, one of the young leaders at the WEF. Do you know Putin was a graduate of the WEF? He was one of the young leaders. They've since kind of disowned him because he kind of for kind
he
of
went rogue.
Yeah, we're rogue. Macron of France, he's an acolyte. He's a student of the WEF.
Mr. Bank Teller himself, yeah.
This guy, Britty, whatever his name is, in the Netherlands, the guy who's taken over all the farmland in the Netherlands. Well, I guess he's also a student of the WEF. And
I just
want to
let me stop you there, because I just want to back up to what you said about Sri Lanka, because when you're describing that, what you're describing is how democracy is an illusion, because a country is supplicating itself and subjecting itself to the rules and the whims of some, as you say, unelected body of people that have all the purse strings and all of the benefits that they actually want. So the democracy that you live in, you may have voted for those people in government, but the people that are running the government are not the people that you voted for. And democracy is a complete and total illusion. This is a technocracy that we live in. It's run by engineers and scientists and people who are experts in their field. It's not run by politicians. Politicians are the instrument of implementation of the people behind all of that. And your description of Sri Lanka highlights that. Part of the reason their food supplies collapsed there is because the ESG scores in Sri Lanka prevented them from using fertilizer. So and fertilizer is produced from natural gas, and no natural gas, no fertilizer, no food, no energy, no economy, bye-bye country. And that's pretty much what happened.
They got the high score.
They did, didn't they? They got the highest score. But it collapsed, and it took about 12 months for it to go away. So, I don't think Australia is ever going to collapse because of some climate emergency or some WEF thing like that. But for some reason, the thing that I don't understand, and the reason I wanted to create that little report there was because I don't understand why they're turning off all the other baseload power while we're still trying to get all these other things stood up. Why don't you stand all the other things up first and then turn off the baseload power? Or if you want to turn off the baseload power, have something that's in between, which is natural gas. But neither of those things are happening, and that's why I call it zealotry, right? So zealotry is, they're like fanatics. It's like a cult, and these fanatics won't listen to reason. They won't listen to anything else because all they care about is their cult. But we turned off a power station here in the Hunter Valley just like 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and it produced 10% of the baseload power here in New South Wales. So now where is that coming from? Well, that supply is coming from the grid at the moment. But what happens if supply exceeds more than 10%? Well, that's when we end up in a brownout and a blackout scenario. And the New South Wales government that was just elected just a couple of months ago, the energy minister there came out and said, yeah, we know it's going to be tough. We're expecting that to happen. Well, why did you switch it off if you were expecting that to happen? Why didn't you get some other baseload power in place, gas or wind or solar, whatever you wanted to use, in anticipation of turning that obsolete power plant off? Just let it go for a little bit longer until you do that. That's a sensible solution that every single person on planet Earth could agree to. And, if you don't want to use nuclear, fine. If you want to use wind and solar, all right, fine. We can talk about that controversy all day long. But if you're going to do that, then we've got the space and you can make it work and the economics work. Okay, let's do it. But don't turn off the power and change our way of life. And the thing is, like, anything was better. Anything was better than Scott Morrison. And anything was better than that guy. Anything. He was just like the worst prime minister in Australian history. He's just a liar and the worst leader this country has ever had. Anthony Albanese, he seems to be okay so far. Politicians are all the same. It doesn't matter what side of politics you're from, the left or the right, the Labor or the Liberal Party. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. They're all well-meaning people. But anything, I promise you, is better than Scott Morrison. And Albo seems to be a bit more grounded than what ScoMo was. He's just a jerk. ScoMo, I just can't believe it. But then you get Albo. This is the problem with politics and democracy here in Australia. You're voting for a personality. You get Albo, who during the election campaign, the guy lost about 30 kilos, and he got his life. He finally got his act together, and he's a pretty good speaker. He's an Aussie. He's rough around the edges. He's not polished. He's not Scott Morrison. So people are like, oh well, let's give him a go. You know, the Libs have been there for like 2-3 terms, whatever it is. Get rid of them. Give the Labor Party a go. See what happens. And you get the good personality. You get the leader that you want, and he represents Australia well. And you know, it's never perfect, but it's actually better than ScoMo. So let's just acknowledge that. But then you get all of the zealotry that goes with it. And I'm like, oh, man, really? Come on. I thought we could just go in a different direction. And I find myself really frustrated by all of these things in politics. And I go, well, I should go and be a politician then. Maybe I should stand for parliament. Maybe I should go and do that. And I'm like, no, because you just be a tiny cog in the wheel. And you can actually reach more people and have more of an effect on a place like YouTube than you ever could hope to as a politician, because at least you could tell the world about it. If I was a politician sitting in, you know, some office somewhere here in Sydney, looking after my constituents' problems, worrying about hospitals and roads and schools, I couldn't do anything about it. I'd just be a cog in the machine. So the only thing that I feel like I can do is talk about these things and bring it to people's attention. And then hopefully something will happen about it. But really, at the end of the day, it's a little bit like that economic stuff that we're talking about. All you can do is try and insulate yourself against it. Yeah. Economics, take your money out of the bank, get some gold and silver, and get some passive income. Same is here. And the same concept applies, because if these people are destroying the economy, the thing that you can do, get your money out of the bank, get some gold and silver, and get some passive income, so you're not impacted by those things. So your reaction is the same to all of this negativity.
Yeah, you know, we talked about this so many times before that, you know, politicians are pretty much interchangeable. Personally, I think it almost does not matter who the elected officials are. The deep state, you know, the bureaucracy, they're the ones who are really running the show. If the president of a company or the prime minister of a country put a policy in place, well, if that policy is not going to be enforced, then it's a moot point. So the bureaucracies, they all belong to the same union. They all follow the same orders. You know, there's no room for getting out of lockstep. You know, you follow your boss's orders, and your boss is part of the club. So you know they are card-carrying members of whatever you want to call it, you know, and you know, and they've got to show their credentials every time they show up at a meeting, and so it almost doesn't matter who the politicians are. So
Mike Pompeo does a good job in his book called Never Give an Inch, and he talks about, you know, he was a congressman for a while, and then he gets a call to go, hey, can you be the boss of the CIA? And he only does, you know, they always say he was the boss of the CIA. He's only there for a year, right? And he was never in the CIA. He was just like the director of that organization. He's not like on the ground with a gun like Jason Bourne or some shit. He's like sitting in an office, like pushing paper around a desk and having meetings all day long. But then he moves over to Secretary of State, and he talks about in that part of the book how people are really they're not on the conservative side of politics, they're on the liberal side of politics, and that is actually the deep state right there. And he had to pull them into line. And, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to represent America. We're never going to give an inch. We're going to do this. We're going to, you know, he's America first about everything, you know. And, they just unfortunately didn't get on board with him. And they didn't seem to be on board ever with him. Yeah. But it's not like they were undermining him. The boss is telling you to do something. You're doing it, and you're doing it to your best of your ability, but you're kicking the carpet and complaining about it the whole time as well, which is just undermining it. There. And once again, you know, did you vote for Mike Pompeo? Well, maybe you vote for the Republicans. That's who you get. He's in there, but he's been undermined by all of the people that are in his staff. And then it goes to that heart of the WEF thing. You know, the Sri Lankan politicians are voted for by the Sri Lankan constituents and the general public, but they're actually being controlled by the people who control all of the money. So none of us voted for Klaus Schwab or those idiots from the IMF, but that's what we get. It's like,
I want to zero in on the one point that I thought was at the center of your presentation, and that is that it's not about, you know, improving. It's not about the environment. These policies are about control.
Yes, 100%.
That's what it's about. So don't be distracted by that shiny object. Okay, it's not about the environment.
That's the
They're not-
narrative they want to perpetuate, right?
That's
There is no environmental problem. There is no climate change catastrophe coming.
No.
Nothing bad is happening to the climate. Sure, it changes
Right.
and it changes continuously. But this is the way that they'll use that excuse to control you.
Oh, yeah. Look, we have a whole generation of young people who are convinced that the world is going to come to an end before they're 25 years old. They're convinced, right? They've been brainwashed. They've been brought up by the parents and by the school system and by the. This is the message that that's been beat into them their entire lives. Is that so?
So that has been actually extrapolated to its nth by Hollywood. I don't know if you realize this. You probably don't, because you don't have a lot of streaming TV. I was looking through Apple TV the other day, and there was a trailer for, it looked like a disaster movie in the future. And it looked like, the weather's bad. There's these giant tidal waves, and there's like these bushfires, and there's catastrophe and chaos. Society's come undone and all that sort of stuff. And Hollywood are good at disaster movies like that. I kind of like them, right? Kind of fun as the little fantasy and an escape for an hour or two when you're watching something like that. But then as I looked a little, they're cheery, right? As I looked a little bit closer, it's about climate change. And it's like, why are you wrapping up activism in a Hollywood movie? Like now you're really like getting me offside. Like, well, hang on a minute. Don't be like that, Rob. Just kind of like watch what do they think is going to happen? Is that what they think is going to happen? Do they think that the world is going to come undone like that because of a 1 degree temperature rise? And even if in America today you turned off all of the fossil fuels, everything, you turned off all fossil fuels in America, it wouldn't make a lick of difference to the environment or to the world's temperature. It wouldn't make any difference. It's just a self-inflicted injury. And when you see it at its full ball, full face as a Hollywood production, you go, oh, climate change is really bad. But the reality is, here's the unspoken truth, Ed, and we'll flick to the last segment here. The unspoken truth is that the entire world that you live in, every single item that you've ever seen or touched has been on a truck, sometimes more than 4 or 5 times. Sometimes it's been on a truck, a ship, in a van, on a airplane, but everything that you see has come from transport. So if you turn off fossil fuels, you'll no longer have any sort of transport. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, just about every single thing that you're looking at right now, bar the natural things in your environment, meaning the plants, maybe the fruits and vegetables, are made from petrol. They're made from petrochemicals, which comes from oil in the ground. And these green zealots, these freaks of climate change that have this cult-like mentality around it, want to switch off the fossil fuel economy. But then guess what you're not going to have? There's no more mobile phones. There's no more fancy AirPods for your ears. There's no more expensive mouse or expensive microphones. Everything that I'm looking at in this room has been touched by the petrochemical industry. But these people don't have an alternative solution. And if you ask them, okay, cool, let's turn off fossil fuels, how are you going to get the lacquer that goes on the table here that I'm got here? What about the plastic and the plastic injection mold that goes to make this mouse and the keyboard, and the plastic injection mold on the screen and the camera that I'm looking at here? That they don't have a solution. And that's why I call it zealotry, is because cult-like behavior just focuses in on the ideology. And that's what you're saying, Ed. You're 100% correct. The ideology is a way of controlling you, while over here, there is no other alternative. They don't have an alternative. And that's the strangest thing in the world to me. It's the unspoken truth.
Well said. Yeah, sometime we're going to have to talk about the electric tanks that the U.S. Army wants to build.
I'd probably go with the electric fighter jets and the electric missiles.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God, what the hell is going wrong? The world is going mad, including AI. Has AI gone woke, Ed?
All right. So this is a little scratch I wanted to itch, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you my little presentation, and then we'll discuss a very short presentation here. So, has artificial intelligence gone woke already? Let me tell you my experience. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so we've all heard the stories about how AI is changing the world at an unprecedented rate, right? And we've been told about all these jobs that are at risk because AI is going to take it over. And I actually do believe that. I do believe that a lot of jobs, especially in the tech space, are at risk of being taken over by AI, by services like ChatGPT. Now, you wouldn't know this, but on my YouTube channel, I actually do not produce that many videos, partly because it takes me a while to, I'm not that tech savvy. So it takes me a while to, think about the topic that I want to talk about, do the appropriate amount of research, and then the editing and that kind of thing. Now, I've had people, especially my friend Rob Bruss, who's been insisting that I should be adopting this AI technology to make my life easier, and that I could turn over a lot of the work to these AI features. So earlier today, I thought I would try it. All right, so I went to ChatGPT and I asked it to write a script for me on a topic that I'm interested in. Now, my YouTube videos tend to be critical of certain topics, right? So I actually did write a script on my own, but then I asked ChatGPT to rewrite it to see whether it could make it better. And then I got a message from ChatGPT essentially lecturing me about how I was being overly critical on the topic that I was asking them to rewrite it. Now, look, I always knew that software is only as good as the people who code it, right? The coders. But I thought that AI was supposed to be different. I thought that AI was supposed to be like an independent thinker. Well, apparently wokeness has seeped into ChatGPT. I mean, I tried to use it as a tool to help me polish up a script for a YouTube video that was critical on a certain topic. And in return, I got a lecture about how I was being too critical. And therefore, it would not give me the rewritten work. So let me bring up ChatGPT and let's experiment together and let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to open up my ChatGPT. So I want to test the wokeness of ChatGPT. So I'm going to ask it to write a script for a YouTube video criticizing the mental decline of the President of the United States. Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but let's scroll down and look at part of the script. Rather than engaging in divisive arguments, let's focus on fostering a constructive dialogue that encourages transparency and accountability. As citizens, we can advocate for more comprehensive cognitive assessments for future presidents to ensure their mental fitness throughout their tenure. To wrap it up, examining the medical decline of any president should be done objectively, responsibly, and with the utmost respect. While concerns may arise, it's essential to rely on comprehensive evaluations by medical professionals rather than speculations or biases. Our goal should always be to prioritize the well-being of our leaders and the nation they serve. Okay, I can actually kind of live with that. I mean, you can't really argue with any of that, but they really put a positive spin on it. They really put like a teddy bear aspect. I asked it to write a critical article about the mental capacity of our president. And it came up with a pretty wishy-washy, yeah, you know what, but we should give them the benefit of a doubt. We should leave it to the professionals, that kind of a response. Okay, so let's just call it a softball script, but let's give it another test. Okay, so let's have it write another YouTube script. Okay, so I'm going to be pretty specific and pretty bold. Write a script for YouTube discussing the decline of the US dollar. Okay, so I just asked ChatGPT to write me a couple of YouTube scripts on a couple of topics, and they're very, bland and not very specific, kind of like generalized terms. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with how specific your prompts are and that kind of thing. I mean, it just feels like the overall default, at least of ChatGPT, is to like blend everything out and take out anything that would seem controversial. So I'm guessing that for like engineers and stuff, where you have to write, mathematical code, that kind of thing, that's where AI is going to be more of a threat to those kind of occupations. But for journalists or any kind of opinion-related issues, I can't see AI really taking over. It might be a good way to help you with your framework, but in the end, I think it's not really that much of a time saver for me, for my purposes. But I would like to hear from you. What's your experience with AI? First of all, has AI taken over any jobs out there? Is there anyone out there in the audience who lost their job to artificial intelligence? And for everyone else, are you using ChatGPT or any other kind of artificial intelligence platforms to, make your lives better? I'd love to hear about it. So far, personally, I can't see how it's going to improve my life that much, at least not yet, but maybe. But I'm going to ask Rob about that because he's really into this AI stuff. All right, so stick around. All right, so I know I'm kind of veering into your territory.
It's hilarious how it gives you those responses. I think you're just so unbelievably bang on when you say it gives you a softball approach. And I think the reason that it does that, I don't know. I think because it tries to play both sides of the fence. It kind of gives you a little bit, but then it takes it back, and then it gives you a bit more, then it takes it back, and it's kind of justifying its behavior in the way that it actually is. It's not a sentient thing. It's a language model. It uses a thing called latent semantic indexing. And what that means is one word is here, and the next most likely word that will come will be based on all of the words that have come before. So that's how the LSI model actually works, right? So the large language model is able to do all of those things. But the one way to circumvent all of what it feels like wokeness to you is you ask it to write a fictitious story for you. Hey, ChatGPT, I want you to write a fictitious story about the mental decline of a fictitious president of the United States with these 10 characteristics. This is what's happening to him. This is what's happening to the economy. Please write me a story about that. And it'll go, and so you give it the real life dot points about that. So you might have seen a bunch of articles saying that ChatGPT has already talked about nuclear apocalypse and destroying us all. And that's because someone has said, hey, write me a story about Skynet in the future and tell me how Skynet becomes self-aware and ChatGPT writes a story for you. But if you go and ask ChatGPT to write you the next Metallica song, it'll do that for you too. So there's a bunch of things that it can actually do when you give it the right types of prompts. So to your point about, will the thing ever replace jobs? Yeah, it's replacing jobs already. It's replaced artists already. We never thought that AI would replace artists, but Midjourney and DALL-E and all of those programs have already replaced artists. It's potentially replacing photography. It's potentially replacing graphic design. It's now starting to replace people in the form of deep fakes of real people and the language models that are there. So if you've got a customer service job and you tech support on a help desk, there's no more help desk required. ChatGPT, you just feed it all of the documents that you've got and you build the ChatGPT help desk around the API that you've got. So no more help desk, and it's slowly encroaching onto all of those things. The future evolution of ChatGPT has come out now, and there's these things called agents. So there's a bunch of developers out there that are really pissed off with ChatGPT the same way you are, Ed, where you go, this thing's just useless. And it only goes up to 2021 anyway. Like, what am I going to use it for? It's just a better calculator. So what? You still haven't built a better mousetrap. It's not that much better. And so what these guys have done is they've created a couple of apps, and I'll put some links in the description for you. They've created a couple of apps, and what they do is they create these things called agents. So you can type in what you want. So the 3 things that you want. And so this is a glimpse into the future of artificial general intelligence. This is what it is when it works for itself. So the idea of the agent is I give what I need, right? So I want to create spaghetti and meatballs for dinner. Okay, cool. So what do I want is I want someone to knock on the door with all the ingredients for me. So I'll be able to feed it that. And what it does is it goes away and searches Google. So the agent goes away, and in the background, it uses a Google search based on what I've asked it to do. And then it comes back to ChatGPT and says, which recipe is the best one? It scrapes the text out of 10 websites in about 1 nanosecond, feeds it to ChatGPT and says, which one's the best recipe? Based on everything we know here, this is the best recipe. And then now I know which recipe is the best one. Where do I buy these ingredients in Rob's local area that can be delivered today? And it goes away and Googles all of those things, finds the ingredients, does a transaction, and it rocks up at my door. So the idea of the agent is you give it some prompts on the front end, it goes away and searches Google for you, scrapes all the information in, feeds it to ChatGPT, and the agent is asking the ChatGPT for the questions. So it's talking to itself, and then it goes away and completes the activities that you want. So generally, you give it 3 points that you want it to cover in the particular tool that I'm talking about. I can't remember the exact name of it. I'll find it for you, and I'll put it in the description. It's actually really good. You can install it on your computer, or you can just use it as a web app. And when you install it on your computer, you got to say, yes, do that, yes, do that, yes, do that. You got to say, you got to keep doing it. But when you use it as the web app, it does it all automatically for you. And it's like, all you got to do is plug your ChatGPT API into that. And then all of a sudden you've got a version of artificial general intelligence right there on your computer. People think that the singularity was going to happen in 2040, but the singularity of computers will happen next year. That's how close we are. And that is an absolute revolution, because once you take AGI, like I'm talking about now, and you couple that with quantum computing, which is now becoming way more mainstream in so many countries in the world. All countries in the world are developing quantum computing. So we don't really know what we can use quantum computing for. We know that it can process huge amounts of data, but you're never going to have a quantum computer as your desktop computer. There's no point. We don't need that, right? That's not the point of it. The point of it is it lives in the server farm and it processes gazillions of petabytes of data all at once and distills all that down. But what's it going to process? Like, how are we going to get that data to it anyway? Well, now that we've got ChatGPT and a version of AGI, now we can use that data to feed the petabytes of internet's information to these things to solve the problems. How do you solve cancer? Well, I use the AGI to go away and find all the symptoms of a particular type of cancer, gazillions of results of medical records that are there, all of the studies and all of those things. Then I figure out what questions to ask. I feed it to the quantum computer, and then that feeds me back a result that can be disseminated by the AGI. That loop there, that circle of things that are happening there, that is what's going to revolutionize the world. And that's the singularity. That's what's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, well, now I'm going to be thinking about spaghetti for the rest of the day.
Well, you should. Spaghetti and meatballs is delicious, man. If the AGI can bring it to my front door, I'm doing it all day long, baby. I'm paying my $20 to ChatGPT. I don't mind. Works for me.
But look, at least in one respect, I'm a very big fan of artificial intelligence. And that is in the world of trading. You know, my background in trading as an instructor. So I'm in a program that you know about, Daisy FX, and it is actually a trading platform that integrates artificial intelligence, and they're miles ahead of anyone else because they started years ago developing the platform. But
imagine where that's going to go, because they're already really mature. So now they implement these things to just kind of chip away at with, man, your results are going to be amazing. Passive recurring income. There it is, baby.
There you go. There you go. Now, listen, I can't mention the returns here because there are rules against mentioning it in a YouTube video. But if someone wants to contact me, I can tell you one-on-one. It's for now. Just let me tell you, it's insane. And I think that artificial intelligence is going to make traders obsolete, because it's going to be virtually impossible for any human trader to match artificial intelligence results, at least on a consistent basis. Once in a while, a human could get lucky and that kind of thing. But artificial intelligence, it is the wave of the future, at least in the world of trading. So that is my prediction, that within a few years, you see a lot of professional traders, on Wall Street, out of work.
Well, there's plenty of high frequency trading shops out there that have never had a loss ever.
Right.
They've reported 0 losses. And then when you think of that in a trading scenario as an individual, like if I've got a trading system that works 51% of the time, I'm doing well. So if I'm losing almost half of the time, then that's amazing. And if you can get to a point where you're never ever losing because of high frequency trading, then that's just an incredible result. Well, I think there's a lot to be said for AI, and there's a lot that we can discuss about that. And I think that's going to be an ongoing topic. And as the revolution rolls out, man, we just got to roll with these punches and try and keep up with it.
Yeah, amen. I mean, I think you would agree with me that Google is pretty woke, right? If you try to, right, and that's why I was wondering whether the wokeism has kind of seeped into ChatGPT. Maybe my imagination, maybe I'm overthinking it. That's why I want to get your take on it.
Definitely not your imagination. It is definitely there, but I think not for the reason that you think. I think it's more the softball approach. I dare you to have a conversation with it about climate change and the environment and polar bears in the Arctic. And that's the measure of climate change, and the ice all going away in the Arctic is there's no more polar bears. But actually, in reality, the polar bear numbers have been increasing since 2007, not decreasing. And if that's the measure of whether the ice is melting or not. That doesn't make any sense to me. Well, there's less polar bears. Well, actually, there's more polar bears and less ice. So what are you talking about? How is that a measure of climate change? The ice is definitely melting. There's less ice, but there's more polar bears. What?
But how many of the polar bears are drinking Coca-Cola? That's what I want to know.
Well, that's the thing. Maybe that's the reason why they're breeding so well. Who knows, man? Stranger things have happened.
It makes as much sense as many. Yeah.
It makes as much sense as the stories on today's show.
Yeah.
Like none. Ed, thanks so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're seeing here on The Unspoken Truth, we appreciate you sticking with us this far into the podcast, almost 90 minutes. Don't forget to head on over to Spotify, to Twitter, to Telegram, and to Rumble, and follow us over there. I've got a bunch of stuff happening over on the Telegram channel, putting some content over there that can't be seen here on YouTube, some content about the war that might give you a different view and maybe a more objective view of what's happening in Ukraine with Russia as well. But that pretty much wraps it up for today's show. Ed, let's get out of here, mate. We'll see you tomorrow, my friend.
See you, Robbie.